Okay, geweldig. Okay. Now I want to announce, I keep on forgetting to announce, so now I'm going to announce it. I believe that we have sponsors for today's show, but we have to announce that our learning should be a schus for a Yerushalayim for Shimon Stern. I don't know his full name. If anybody does, please share with me. And for Ernie Mann, that's the Yerushalayim. I believe I announced yesterday. I did announce yesterday that the broadcast was sponsored by Benchy Bench in honor of the yahrzeit of the Baba Sali. And the Baba Sali, we always say his should have an aliyah, but he should continue to be Poel Yeshua and Mel Yosher and Paul Yeshua.
Yes, I believe it's Shimon Yehuda ben Rivka.
Shimon Yehuda ben Rivka should have a full shalom. Does anybody have Ernie Mann's name?
Dr. Shmuel ben Chana.
Dr. Shmuel ben Chana should have a full shalom. Zok the Hilig Mishnah. B'nei ha'ir shemachu rechayv shalir. The city decided to sell the main square of the city. And the Gemara is going to tell us what's unique about the main square of the city, what shaykhs it has to religious observance, is that we discussed in Tainus that at the most severe of the fasts, they would take the bima out, or the aron out, into the main square of the city, and they Klal Yisrael would daven there with the public tefillos they would have outside. Okay, okay. So the halacha is b'nei ha'ir shemachu rechayv shalir. So if they sold the rechayv shalir, which has a certain level of kedusha, like Rashi says over here, yesh bekedusha k'demafarish b'gemara hoyel u'mispal u'mboy b'tanya yisuva ma'avados. So the money isn't just free and clear money. That money retains a certain level of kedusha. Now we're going to have a discussion later today. If I pay money for the rechayv shalir, so logic should say that it's sort of getting redeemed. The kedusha of the rechayv shalir should be transferred to the money, and the rechayv shalir should be free and clear to do anything you want with. We're going to see that that's not so simple. It's possible that both things retain their kedusha, and that's going to be relevant to a Reb Kiva kasha we're going to have today, on which he remains v'tzorech in gadol. So the halacha is they sell the main square of the city. So loichem b'dama, they're not allowed to downgrade the value of the money. They can only upgrade it. So they can buy a basic knesses, which is a level up from the rechayv shalir. There's a shaila if you're allowed to buy something of equal kedusha. Could they buy another rechayv shalir? Basic knesses. What if they sold the basic knesses? Once again, the money has to move up one madrega. Loichem teva, they can buy a teva. Whether the teva is the bima or the aron kodesh, I think it's the aron kodesh. Most of the Mepharshim say it's an aron kodesh. Teva, if they sell the aron kodesh, warning. Loichin mitpachos, they can buy the mantla with which they cover the sefer, which the sefer is covered. Good morning. Mitpachos. What if they sold the mantla? So then the next level up is svarim, and Rashi says it doesn't mean sefer Torah. It means Nevi'im uksuvim. They can buy the scrolls of the Nevi'im uksuvim. What about svarim? What if they sold svarim? Then loichem Torah. Then with that money they can buy a sefer Torah. So it works as ma'ilin b'kodesh, but on the other rate, im achu Torah loichu svarim. Svarim loichu mitpeiches. Mitpeiches loichu teva, and teva loichu v'sekneses. What if you have excess money? So you sold a rechayv shalir and you bought a basic knesses, but you had extra money. Even that extra money has to be reserved for a higher level of kedusha. Let's see Rashi. Avamachu Torah shemaylim b'kodesh v'lo meridin. Tosefta maylim b'kodesh nechsiv v'yokam Moshe hamishkan. Meaning Betzalel also, Betzalel built the Mishkan, he constructed it. Moshe he set it up. You can't downgrade. They took the machnos of the adas koyach and they made it into a plating for the mizbeach. They moved it up because they were used for akrava, so they can't just be left to be chulin. They have to be upgraded. Kivin shehuktashu, huktashu. Once they become kodesh, they retain their kedusha. V'chein b'mayshrein, so Rashi machu svarim, v'lachu mimiktzas hadamim Torah, but they still have extra money. Lo yichu min hamoyser davar shekedushasoi pechusa. So any of the monies have to be used to buy something with a greater kedusha. Or Rashi says nothing that's less kadosh, so that's clear. Nothing that's less kadosh, and therefore, you're not allowed to buy, even with the leftover money, something of a lower level of kedusha. Zok tehele gemara. Bnei ha'ir shemachu rechai b'shalir. Amar Rabba bar Barchana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Zu divrei Rabbi Nachman ben Yosy stumsaha. These are the words of Menachem ben Yosy. And Rashi says we have a Meforshah Tosefta that quotes him as saying this exact halach. Abba Chachamim Ayrim, the Chachamim argue, in this Herachayiv ain't by B'Shem Kedusha. The Rechai b'Shalir has no Kedusha at all. And therefore, if you sell it, you can buy anything you want with the money. You don't have to buy a basic Knesset with it. Rabbi Menachem ben Yosy, my time, what's his svara? Why is there any level of Kedusha in a town square? So tomorrow, Hoyel v'A'ah mispalin and boy v'tinios v'maymados. Since there are times, occasionally, where people daven there, either by tiniest or by Maimados, where the people of the Maimad, they'll often gather in the city of the person who's the head of the Maimad, and they will daven in the Rechav of the air over there. And Rashi has a long harichas on where you find that happens. V'Rabbanan, so how could the Rabbanan say that the Rechav Shalir has no Kedusha? It seems like we do daven there from time to time. Since we only daven there from time to time, it's not something that's used steadily. That doesn't give it a level of kedusha. And therefore, it's like any other asset of the city that does not have to be used for a davar shebekdusha. Zoktimar, Beis HaKnesses. They sold the Beis HaKnesses. Loich Teva, you have to go one step up. Amar Rab Shmuel bar Nachmeni, Amar Rab Yonasan. This that we say that you could even sell a basic Knesset, that's only if it's in a village where everybody could agree to it. If you're in a big city where people come and go from all over the place, since people come and contribute and benefit from the shul that don't necessarily even live there, that's a bishmeish that cannot be sold, period. The Havilel the Rabbin, because it belongs to the Rabbin. So no Kehillah can decide that they want to sell because they don't have exclusive control or rights over this building. And therefore they're not allowed to sell it. Let's see what Tosfos says. Keeping the Malakas near the fire shop. Keeping Shiroi b'nei Adam. Regilim l'lecha sham l'spal. Since many people daven there. Af al pi she'ein noisnim klum b'binyanai. Even though they don't contribute 1 penny to the upkeep, David Klein would love to learn this Tosfos. Mikol Makay, Kivan Ladas Oyson Rabim Nasa, since the shul is built, having in mind that it's going to service not just its members, but the Rabbim, therefore Chamura Kedushasai, it has a severe Kedusha, the Einon Yechaylin L'Moichay. The Kehillah who paid for it, the Kehillah controls it, they don't have a right to sell it because it's a building that's used by the public, even people who don't have a financial interest. You could say another pshat. Since many people do contribute, and other things as well. I guess it means when people are traveling, you dive into the boat, you have people from all over the world there, and when the Gabe goes around to collect, everybody puts a penny in the pushka, like in most shuls. So come to Chais, it's not only the locals that are supporting the shul, it's even foreigners. Later on, the Gemara is going to say that there was a shul there of Ashi said that I have the right to decide to sell it, because anyone who gives any money to the shul gives it al das that I'm going to control it. Because they give it to do the Ratzon of Rabashi, and therefore he's allowed to. So Ba'al the Gemara just told us a chiddush that a besmedrash that's the rabbin you cannot sell. Omer Rabashi, Hai Knishta, the Masa Machasya, the shul that's in the city of Masa Machasya. Afagav the Ma'alma Osala, even though people come there from all around, so you might want to argue that it cannot be sold. Even that daita didika asi, like Tosfos mentioned a moment ago, since they all come because of me, and whatever they give al das me, so they're letting me decide what should be done with the shul. I am qualified. I'm authorized to sell the shul. Meisei, Amar Yehuda, Meisei bebeis haknesses shall Tursim. Once upon a time, there was a beis haknesses of Rashi says Tursim are tzarfei nachoshes. So we always talk about the bottom of Drushim used to be split up by trades. So people of the same trade would daven together. And there's a couple of different svaris why. One pshat is because the people who work with the choshes have a certain smell to them from the working with the choshes. Nobody wants to sit near them. So they feel comfortable sitting amongst each other. But the other pshat that the Mefarshim say is people who are in the same business or in the same trade, they all hate each other because they're competitors. So hopefully they don't even talk to each other. So this way, if they all daven in the same shul, you're guaranteed that there'll be no talking. So Yerushalayim, that was in Yerushalayim, Shemachrua, that they sold it to Rebbe Eliezer. They sold it to Rebbe Eliezer. The Osabal Kol Trachim, and Rebbe Eliezer did whatever he wanted with it. Correct the Gemara, let's think about it. The Hazat the Krachim have it. A besmedrash in Yerushalayim, that's definitely a besmedrash of Krachim where people come from all over. So how could you sell it? Didn't we just say that a beis hamedrash of krachim you cannot sell? That was a very small shul. And they built it. So kum dechois, it wasn't a besmedrash that everyone walked in. It wasn't like the Neishar of Shtiblach or like Zichron Moshe. It was a small little shul in a hole that nobody even knew about, and that's not something that we consider that the rabbim rely on. Meisvei. It says if there's going to be a nega, v'veis eretz achuzascha, in a home in the land of your inheritance. And we learn from there, achuzaschem mitame b'negoyim. If it's your Yerusha, it could be mitame b'negoyim, but the ein Yerushalayim mitame b'negoyim. But no home in Yerushalayim could become tamei through negoyim because no one ever got a piece of the city of Yerushalayim. And Rashi tells us, that's not called your inheritance. Like the Gemara is going to discuss a little bit further. This Tana holds, when Eretz Yisrael was divided amongst the Shvatim, Yerushalayim was kept as an international city. It was not given exclusively to anyone. Even though Yehuda and Binyamin both are around Yerushalayim, but they own the area around it, but they don't own Yerushalayim itself. Yerushalayim was kept as a universal city. So therefore, it cannot be the Tumas Nigei Batim will not be relevant in the city of Yerushalayim because nobody owns it exclusively. Amar Yehuda, Ani lo shamati, I didn't hear this. So it's Rashi Shelo Yehi Mitame. I never heard such a halacha that no homes in the city of Yerushalayim will become tamei. Ela Mokum Mikdash Bavad, only the place of the Beis Hamikdash itself. So that's Rashi. Ani lo shamati Shelo Yehi Mitame Ela Mokum Mikdash Bavad. Why? Mishum the Beis Shal Kodesh. The Beis Hamikdash is a bias of kedusha. So nothing to do with the fact that it doesn't belong to anybody exclusively. Maybe it does belong to Yehuda or Binyamin. The reason why the Beis Hamikdash itself cannot become tamei b'negoyim is because it's a house of kedusha. The gab b'negoyim it says uva shaloya bayis b'ina, and you don't own the house. You don't own the Beis Hamikdash. Abo Yerushalayim, but homes in Yerushalayim mitame b'negoyim. They are susceptible to tumas negoyim. This savar because Rabbi Yehuda is going to hold, this Rabbi Yehuda is going to hold, Nechle kol shvatim. The city of Yerushalayim itself was distributed to the Shvatim, and therefore, v'achuzaschem karina lei. They qualify under the requirement of achuzaschem that the Torah says is required to be susceptible to tumas negayim. Katani mias. But let's go back and analyze the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Katani mias Rabbi Yehuda to islay nischalka. Clearly, Rabbi Yehuda holds that Yerushalayim was distributed to the individual Shvatim. Loishanu, and what did he say? Loishanu elamaka mikdash. The only building in Yerushalayim that cannot have tumas negayim is the base of mikdash itself. But what about other shuls that are in the city of Yerushalayim? The other shuls that you could find in Yerushalayim are kashar batei ha'ir. Because Rabbi Yehuda says the only thing that cannot become tumas negayim is the base of mikdash itself. But all the shuls in Yerushalayim could become tummy. But it goes back to our same question. Sure, they might not be immune from the goyim because it's considered achuzaschem, but there's another problem why they should be immune to the goyim. And that's because they're shalkrach. And shalkrach, by definition, is a public property. Like we said, you can't sell it. So why is it that it's going to be susceptible to the goyim? So let's see inside. I only heard that the base of mikdash is not matama with the goyim. Shuls that are found in Yerushalayim, mitamin would be susceptible to tumas negoyim. Amai, based on what our Gemara is saying, they shouldn't be susceptible because the krochan of it, many tourists come and go and daven in this shul, and therefore the city should not have a right to sell it. Change, amend what we're quoting from Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Rabbi Yehuda is not just saying that the Makam Mikdash is not susceptible to Tumas Negayim, but any Makam Kodesh, Makam Kodesh Bavad, any place that has Kedusha, meaning any shul in Yerushalayim, including the Beis HaMikdash, but every other shul as well, cannot be susceptible to Tumas Negayim because of the reasoning that we're saying, because people come, Me'alma, it's not just a private shul. Now the Gemara wants to drill down and understand what is the status of Yerushalayim. What is the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanna Kama? Tanna Kama savar lo nechleka Yerushalayim l'shvatim. Yerushalayim was never distributed to the shvatim; it was remaining as a public property. Rabbi Yehuda savar nischalka Yerushalayim l'shvatim. Now it's a little bit difficult, so we need to focus on this. At the end of the day, there was no free for all, everybody killing each other to grab land in Yerushalayim to make a house. I believe it was the inhabitants, it was the people of Shevet Yehuda who did live in Yerushalayim. So it doesn't mean like they didn't get the land at all, but we're going to see there were certain limitations to their ownership. But it wasn't that it wasn't given. You don't find that there was a bloody war with everybody fighting to stake a piece of land in Yerushalayim. So we'll see in a minute where the limitations of ownership of land in Yerushalayim impacted. Well, the there's a machlokes tonight. The Tanya, ma haya bechelkei shel Yehuda. When we're focusing on the pinnacle of what Eretz Yisrael is all about, we're focusing on the Makam HaMikdash. So part of the Makam HaMikdash was in the Chelik of Yehuda, and part of the Makam HaMikdash was in the Chelik of Binyamin, because the Chelik of Yehuda and the Chelik of Binyamin meet by the Makam HaMikdash. So Binyamin, I believe, is north of the sea. The Chelik Binyamin, and we'll see exactly what it is. Ma'ya b'chelek shel Yehuda, Harabais. So now we're working our way from east to west, because when you're walking from east to west, walking towards the Harabais, so the whole Harabais on the east side of the Beis Hamikdash, it was in the land of Yehuda. Halishkais, in Harabais, in the Chel, there were so many different chambers. So again, that's all in the Chelik of Yehuda. The Hazaras, and then you enter Desert Noshim and Desert Yisrael. Again, that was also within the land of Yehuda, and we're walking further towards the west, further towards the building itself. So all this was in Yehuda's Chelik. What was in Binyamin's Chelik? Ulam. So now we're working from west to east. Ulam v'hechel. We're still working from east to west. So what happened was we got up to the Azoros. on Yehuda. We're walking from east to west, and we got up to the Azores. So we're actually right in front of the big Beis Hamikdash Achitzon. Now we're skipping the area of the Beis Hamikdash Achitzon. We're skipping the land that's in between the Beis Hamikdash and the actual Heichal building, and we'll address that area later. And now we're going to jump to the Ulam. So the Ulam was definitely in the Chelek of Binyamin, which is already part of the Heichal building. The Heichal, of course, moving further west, was also in the Chelek of Binyamin. Ubeis Kachei HaKadoshim, the area underneath the Kodesh HaKadoshim, was also in the Chelek of Binyamin. And now we're going to discuss the area from the front of the Heichal through to the east side of the Mizbeach, because that area we have not yet discussed. There was a strip of land that protruded from, we can call it a peninsula, that protruded out of the land of Yehuda, of Yehuda, and it stuck into the Chelek of Binyamin, Uba Mizbeach Banu. And in that little strip of land is where the Mizbeach was built. So let's take a quick look at a picture, and then we'll look at Rashi, just so that we can get clarity in how this was split up. So I'm going to show these pictures here. Here was your Ulam, Heichal, Kodesh, Kodesh, Kodesh. So all this lightly shaded area belonged to Binyamin. According to this pshat, the Mizbeach and the land in between the Mizbeach and the Ulam was also in Binyamin's Chelek. So basically, Binyamin's Chelek wrapped around the Mizbeach on the north side of the Mizbeach, as well as on the south side of the Mizbeach, and at the place where the Yesod would have been on the east side of the Mizbeach, that's where Yehuda's Chelek starts. So the Gemara is going to tell us that there was only a Yesod around the Mizbeach in the Chelek of Binyamin, but not on the east side of the Mizbeach. There was no Yesod there, because that was Yehuda's Chelek, and as well on the southern Yesod, because there's Yehuda's Chelek here. This version doesn't illustrate that so well, but there's another Shita. There's other Shitas in how it was laid out. There's another Shita where it looked like this. And the Ritzua Yotzes is a strip of land, a small strip of land that was the thickness of what the Yesod would have been, that extended from east to west, from Yehuda's Chelek into Binyamin's Chelek. So here it's more clear, that comment of Ritzua Yotzes. This is the demarcation point. This is the border between Yehuda and Binyamin. But there was one small strip of land that would have housed the Yesod, the southern Yesod of the Mizbeach. That strip of land belongs to Yehuda, and there's no Yesod there. And there's another version where the strip of land encompasses the entire area south of the Mizbeach. But regardless, we know that it's the Mizbeach, the east side of the Mizbeach is the primary border between Yehuda and Binyamin, besides the little peninsula here and there. So let's see Rashi. Rashi says,
Yossi,
yes.
I just want to know, so the ramp would just be the airspace of whatever is underneath it?
I believe so, yeah. So let's see what Rashi says. Harabais, bichnisasai, when you're walking into the complex, mitzara mizrach, walking from east to west, kol ma sheyesh sham panui, all of the flat open land there, korur hayabais, it's called Harabais, shein lo shemacher, it doesn't have any other specific name. The chel was a small fence that said, goyim and people that are tamei are not allowed here. And if you do, it's punishable by death. That was written both in Hebrew and in Greek. And they actually have still remnants of the signs that were all over the chel, in the museums in Eretz Yisrael. You actually could see that original sign. The Azaris, Shaloshtam, the three Azaris, Ezras Nashim, Ezras Yisrael. So the Ezras Nashim is a big Azar, it's a big chamber. There is Yisrael, in Achas Esrei Amma, those are the first 11 Amas. When you walk into the gates of the main Azara, the first 11 Amas are Yisrael is allowed to stand there. So Yisrael, Rishoyin, Lichanes, Lefnim, and Ashar. Those are the 11 Amas that are Yisrael is allowed to be within the walls of the Azara. V'achareim l'tad mizrach l'eshes kahanim yud aleph amma. And then the next 11 amas are 11 amas that the kahanim work in. Yisrael is not supposed to go there. Shebein drisis ragla Yisrael l'mizbeach hachita. So 11 amas from when you walk into the Azara is Ezra Yisrael, and the next 11 amas from there until the eastern wall of the Mizbeach is an area that the Kohanim stand. From the west side, they had the Ulam and the Hechel. Achshav, Yoser, Beintayim, Mokam HaMizbeach, Lamed Beizama. And then there was the actual footprint of the Mizbeach, which was 32 amas. Uvein the Ulam VaMizbeach, and the land that was west of the Mizbeach up until the Ulam was another Chof Beis Amma. Shaloi Pirish Shalmihu, that is not clear. It hasn't been directly addressed who that belonged to. Chazar Pirish, the Brisa goes back to explain about this Ritzuya Yoitza, how it was split up, which we discussed using the pictures. Limda Chachkan, we learn from this, the Ritzuya Zulavad Yehuda, just that small strip of land, whichever it is that we're referring to, belonged to Shevet Yehuda. Avot Tzvaynei Shal Mizbeach, the land on the north side of the Mizbeach, which in fact was the butchering area for the Karbanis, Udroimai, and the south side of the Mizbeach, Umayrovai, and the west side of the Mizbeach, Shall Binyamin, all belong to Binyamin. U'Mesechas Vacham Arminam, She'ein Yehuda ba'Oser Ritzuya, Elah Mizrachis Mokam HaYisod. The only strip of land that Yehuda owned was the area that abuts the eastern wall of the Mizbeach, which is the place where the Yisod would have been. And that's why there is no Yisod there, because the Yisod has to be in Binyamin's Chelek. So Binyamin got most of the Beis HaMikdash, except he missed a small little strip of land by the Mizbeach. Zok to Gemara, even that bothered Binyamin something terrible. And it says, while you Binyamin HaTzadik mitztar aleh b'chol yoim l'boila. It bothered him all the time that he was going to miss that chiluk. Shenemer chayfif olav kol hayoim. He was like itchy in his clothing. He was moving around. V'fichach zacha Binyamin v'nasa ushpischa mashchina. That's why he was zoicha that the Aron Kodesh, the base Kodesh Kedoshim, wasn't his chiluk. So it's a little bit interesting because it was split up at the same time.
Are we talking about Binyamin the person or Binyamin the shape?
Binyamin the person.
How could he? He was never in Eretz Yisrael, and it wasn't until the time of David HaMelech that the land was appropriated and decided. They didn't even know where the Beis HaMikdash should be built. How could he be?
Kasha number one, and the Oid Kasha, whenever it was split up, it was split up where he got everything and Yehuda got that little Mokam HaYisod. So what do you mean? Because he was upset about the Yisod, that's why he was Zoicha to get the Mokam Aron Kodesh. He got the Mokam Aron Kodesh at the same time that he lost the Yisod. So the Charedim struggle with this. And they say that he knew Baruch HaKodesh that he wasn't going to get all of the Mizbeach. That's what he knew Baruch HaKodesh first. And that bugged him. So then Hashem said, okay, so I'm going to give you everything else. So although when it was split, it happened much after Binyamin's life. And when it happened all at the same time. But I guess in the planning stages, when Binyamin heard Baruch HaKodesh, that's where this Chayfif Olav Kol Hayoim came from. At first, he was told that part of the Mizbeach would be in Yehuda's Chelek, and that was driving him crazy. And then in the schar of that, he got everything else. Maybe had he not complained, Yehuda would have gotten more of the Makam HaMikdash. It's funny because when the moon complained, he lost out.
I was just thinking that. Yeah.
So I don't, it's hard for me to understand what Binyamin did right, what he did wrong. I'll accept it. So Zok to Gemara, the High Tana Sovar. Are you telling me that this Tana holds? I'm sorry, it's not kasha. The High Tana Sover and the following Tana that we're going to quote holds that Yerushalayim wasn't Nischalka L'Shvatim. And now we're going to get a better understanding of the limitation of the ownership that they have in Yerushalayim. The Tana we learned Ein maskirin bottom Yerushalayim. You're not allowed to have an Airbnb in Yerushalayim. You cannot charge rent for it. You know why? Because if you own a property in Yerushalayim, it doesn't really belong to you. So now we learned some new halacha that you're not allowed to rent. Now this doesn't mean any time. This means only for aliyah l'regel. When it comes to aliyah l'regel, you're mechuyev to host families who want to come and stay in Yerushalayim, and you're not allowed to charge them. So all year long, you are allowed to charge them. The limitation of loy nischach l'shmatim is by aliyah's regel. When everyone comes up, so if anybody wants a very nice place to stay in Yerushalayim, I can share with you the name of some millionaires who have beautiful homes there, and I'm sure they'll be happy to host you for free because ein maskirin batim Yerushalayim. I suggest that if you ask any one of these people to host you, you don't mention this Gemara. It might not invoke generosity. They might feel threatened when you mention this clause.
That's when they charge the most, as a matter of fact, when they rent
Right.
out.
That's right. Rabbi Lazar Batzadek Leimer, af loy mitos. They don't even have to give you a bed. You can say, okay, you might own the land, I can't charge you rent, but you're sleeping on the bed in my house. I expect that you're going to pay me for the bed. So there's a scam. The apartment is free, but we're charging you $5,000 a night for the bed. They don't even have to. They're not even allowed to charge for the beds. So at the end of the day, Lamaisa, it is a little bit of a burden on the people in Yerushalayim to even supply beds. People who come up to the Oil Regel bring karbanos, and they normally get to keep the hide of their karbanos. The shlamims that they bring, they get to keep the hide of their karbanos that they bring. So the halacha is balu shpizin noitun oisam bizroya. When the people who they're hosting, who are Oil Regel, bring all their hides back from the Beis Hamikdash to their hotel at night, the owner of the hotel can confiscate and take possession of those as at least some type of payment. So you see that even though the etam I can't charge you, but as a courtesy, they sort of have a right to take those items. So Amar Abaye, Shmami, no, you see from here that Arich Ara, it's appropriate to leave a tip when you stay in the hotel. And what type of tip do you leave? The mishpag inish gulfa umoshka bushkize. If you have empty bottles, don't go to the beer store, bring them back, and get the 5 cents per bottle. You'll leave that for the hotel. Let them have the benefit of getting those bottle deposits back. And if you have hides, don't take that with you. Leave that for them. That's the appropriate action to leave them. So not only should you not steal the Hilton towel, you should bring your own towel and leave it for the Hilton. Imagine someone's putting on a towel on his hair after he takes a shower, and he looks in the mirror and it says Hyman or Menzelowski, right? Because you're supposed to leave your towel there. Zog to Gemara Vayter. Amarava. Loy shanu ela shaloi machru shiva tuvayaya. All of these restrictions that we're discussing, and Rashi says it's quite clear. Loy shanu de ein maritin damim mikutushasa. And this is a very important Rashi because this is the Rashi that Rabbi Kiveger asks at Tzarech in Gadol Kasha. So let's read the Gemara inside and then we'll go back to the Rashi. If these restrictions that we say with the Kedusha of the money is only if the asset was not sold, if every single person of the city was there and the Shiva Tuva was there, they had a general meeting and everybody showed up and there was a vote and they decided to sell, that will have a different status. We're talking about a sale that wasn't sold that way. The Gemara says, they could even buy beer and throw a party with the money. So let's see what Rashi says. And I'm going to look at the vav in the back so we get it crystal clear. And the Beis HaKnesses retained its kedusha. So now Rashi just told us a very big chiddush, that even though the money that I get retains kedusha, and I have to buy something that's more kadosh, the asset, the Beis HaKnesses that the purchaser buys, also retains kedusha. If I'm selling svarim, the guy still has svarim, they still have a kedusha. So too, when I sell the basic knesses, it still retains its kedusha. And we're just discussing if the money has kedusha or not. But the asset that I sold retains its kedusha, so it's not a pigeon at all. Now, however, that's how the shaloi machru ha'toivim b'shus ha'am. If it was sold with a unanimous sale, then the kedusha goes off the chavetz umin adamim. Everything becomes chulin. So it's all or nothing. Either there's kedusha both on the money and on the basic knesses, or there's no kedusha at all. And you're allowed to do whatever you want. Behind the boy in Ravina Miravashi, so that we'll see the Gemara later. If you think about it logically, when there's an exchange, there should be a transfer of kedusha. And in fact, Rashi on Chav Zayin Amud Beis, that we're going to get up to on Shabbos. So let's take a quick peek at Rashi. The third Rashi on the second line, the Rabbanon, we'll get to the Gemara, but Rashi says, "Ika lemechesh ben Rav Lamat hakanami." That's not relevant. That's Ika lemechesh shumburim hadis melech. But here's where it gets very important. There's no mechir by basic knesses. We're not worried when you sell a basic knesses. Even the shakal dummy, since there's money being accepted in lieu of the basic knesses, umaluluhu b'kedusha mu'ula, and therefore the money takes on the kedusha because the money is redeeming the base of medrash. Call the boy lekeach of it. The lekeach can do whatever he wants with the basic knesses. So here you see Rashi says that there's a transaction where the kedusha goes from the basic knesses to the money. Yet by us, Rashi says that if you didn't sell it b'shiva tu v'ya'ir, they both retain kedusha, and if you sold it b'shiva tu v'ya'ir, they both don't retain kedusha. So exactly where does Rashi argue on Chozayin and Beis that there is some type of exchange? It's clear from our Gemara, the way Rashi learns it over here, that there's never an exchange. And that's Rabbi Kiva kasha. And the last word of Rabbi Kiva is with Tzorach in Gadol. This is a massive problem that we need to sort out. So let's see the Gemara Vayter. Ravina Havale Hahutila the Veknishta. He had a rune of a basic nessus. Also look Rabashi. He asked Rabashi, he wanted to know, Amalei Maul Mizra, could I plant there? Could I use it as my vegetable garden? Amalei Zil Zavne Mishiva Tubeir. Go make a deal from Shiva Tubeir, but Maimed Al Sheir, and then you can do whatever you want. Vizara, which is like the Eitzah we just discussed on Amar Aleph. Now it's interesting to note the Mefarshim say that you have to have Maimed Al Sheir and Shiva Tubeir, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a unanimous vote. But everybody must be there. So if not everybody shows up to the meeting, not all the members, there's no quorum and the sale won't be valid. But if everyone showed up, even though it wasn't a unanimous vote, the sale is still valid. I guess when your vote is witnessed by everybody, it's a stronger vote than if it's a silent vote. Yeah, very good. Yeah. Rami bar Abba have a kaboni beknishta. He was building the basic nesses, and the problem is he needed building supplies, and there was a COVID going there around then, and it was very hard to get building supplies. So he was looking for building supplies. Havi knishta atika. There was this old basic nesses that wasn't used anymore; it was abandoned. He figured, let me use those supplies. Let me take, I think, Habitat for Humanity. They take building supplies from buildings that are deconstructed. So let's take the beams, let's take the brick, let's take the building supplies from the basic nest that's not being used, and we'll rebuild them into a new beautiful shul. By Yul Hasan. Yosef become a boy lay, told Rab Chisda. So he was clear about what Rab Chisda said. Rab Chisda, loy lister beknishta, adabani beknishta achriti. You're not allowed to take apart, dismantle the old shul until you've already commissioned the new shul. So the question is it Hashem Mishum Pshiusa? There, the reason why you're not allowed to take apart a shul until you build a new shul is because we're afraid that you're never going to build a new shul, and then there'll be no shul at all. But Kihai Gavna, where I'm actually building with the old shul, the new shul, so there's no problem that I might not finish. What will be Allah? Also, Rav Papa said, I'm sorry, you cannot deconstruct the shul. even though you're doing it for the purposes of building a new shul. Rav Huna also said. So I don't know. After Rav Papa said no, he tried finding another Rav, and the other Rav also said no. Amar Rava, it would have been an interesting Gemara if Rav Huna would have said yes, but Rav Huna also said no. Amar Rava, a basic knesses. If you swap it out for something, or if you sell it, then it's going to be mutter. Rashi says, the kedusha of the basic knesses will go on the building that you swapped it out for, or on the money, and it will lose its kedusha, and you can use it. But if you're going to just rent it out or give it as collateral, that's usher, because then it's in someone else's, it's in somebody else's rishos, but it still retains the kedusha of the bes medrash. My time of kedusha. Livne lami. Same thing with the bricks. If you want to take the bricks of the basic knesses, if you swap the bricks for some other asset or sell the bricks, shari, then those bricks will be mutter. But uzufinu, to lend out the bricks, also would be also. That's only if these bricks or the building was actually a shul. If the bricks were actually a shul, you're taking apart a shul. But what if you have skids of bricks that were on the construction site of a shul? You're going to build a shul with it, but it had not yet been built into the shul. Less lamba, for sure you're allowed to give those away. The Vidul Manda Omar has Mana Milsi, even according to the Manda Omar, that when you prepare something for a Dovish Kedusha, the items that are prepared have Kedusha, Hanamili, that's only in a more advanced level of preparation. If someone weaves a beged for the mace, so there's already the beged there, it's already beged, even though you didn't put it on the mace yet, the mace not even be dead yet, that is called hachana, that would answer the beged. This level of preparation, where you only have bricks, you're not even built into anything yet, that's like you have threads that are spun in order to weave a beged. It's too premature, it's not called prepared enough that it would get an issue. Veleka Lamanda Omar, and therefore nobody would hold that this is considered a hazmana. What about matana? Are you allowed to give away a besmendish as a gift? One said it's also, one said it's mutter. Manda asar bahai tifka kedush asa, because it's losing its kedusha. You're giving it over. Manda shari, I'm sorry. Manda asar bahai tifka kedush asa. By giving it away, it's going to lose its kedusha. It's going to be violated. Manda shari, you love the avale hanomine, love yoivle. There's no such thing as a gift. If someone's gifting a shul to somebody, obviously there's something that's coming back in return. So therefore, hadala have a matana kizvini. So ultimately, a matana is like a sale because there's no such thing as a free lunch. Tanarabban, tashmisha mitzvah, things that are used in the service of a mitzvah, nizrakan, they do not have a kedusha, they can be thrown out. But tashmisha kedusha, things that are serving dvarim shebekdusha, nignozin, they're like shemis, they can't just be thrown out. What are examples of tashmisha mitzvah? Sukkah, lulav, shofar, tzitzis, those things do not retain kedusha. They don't have to be put into shemis. What are tashmisha kedusha that you can't just throw out? You have to put into shemis. The lushkami svarim, the wrapper. Rashi amtachas v'sak losum, by the little bag that you put svarim into. Tefillin the mezuzahs, so that your tefillin bag. The tick shall say for Torah. A tick and a nartik are different types of bags. The nartik shall tefillin. Uritzu I say in the ritzu is tefillin. Amarava, Bereish Havamina, Hai Kursaya. I used to think that the Kursaya is the bima, is tashmish this tashmishu. It's not directly servicing the Sefer Torah. It's servicing something that services the Sefer Torah, Vishari, and then it would be mutter, it wouldn't have a din of shemis. And Rashi says because you normally don't put the Sefer Torah directly on the bima, you usually put a shmata. So the shmata is the tashmish kedusha, but the bima itself isn't. But given the chasini, the moisfilu Sefer Torah, since they saw that sometimes they put the Sefer Torah on the bima, even though it doesn't have the shmata on top of it, amina tashmish kedusha huva also, and therefore it has a din of shemis. Vamarava, the reish havamina high prisa is tashmish the tashmishu. I think that prisa, and Rashi tells us it's some type of curtain that they hung around as an inner liner to the oren. So inside the oren they hung curtains inside it. I thought that was a tashmish the tashmish. But given the chasina, the ifile, umanchi sifri luya. But once I saw that they put it down and they wrap it around the Sefer Torah, so it's directly servicing the Sefer Torah. I mean, Hashmish Kedusha hu ba'aser, and then I said that these things are going to be aser. You can't just throw them out. Ramava, hi tivusa the earput. A tivusa the earput is you had an orin and it got ruined, it got loose. So therefore, ma'avda teve zutrasi shari. You're allowed to take it apart and make a smaller orin out of it, a more sturdy one. Persaya aser, but you're not allowed to make a bima out of it. V'amar Rav, and Rav said, hi prisa the bala. If you have the paroiches that got worn out, lemevda prisa lesifri shari, you're allowed to make them as a covering for Sefer Torah. But lechum shinaser, if you don't have a full Sefer Torah, only a partial Sefer Torah, you would not be allowed to make that with the paroiches. V'am Rava, hani zvili dechumshi, the little sacks that they put chumashes in, the kamteri de sifri, and the boxes that they're carried in, tashmish kedusha ninu, they are a tashmish kedusha, v'dignosim they go to shemus. So Gemara Pshita, at first they directly service the Sefer Torah. You might think they're not made as a covet for the Sefer Torah. They're just made to protect the Sefer Torah. Kamash belong that they also have to be put away in shemus. There was a basic knesses that was used by the Roman Jewish community. It was open to a room, so there was a door in the basic knesses that went directly into a room. That there was a mace in there. So the Tumas mace, with the doors open, would go right in to the base medrash. But to have a bo kahani l'meil l'tzliyasim, and they were kahani, they wanted to go daven there. But the problem is the Tumas mace there. So how do we stop the Tumas mace from spreading into the base of medrash? Also, Amalu the Rava, they told Rava, Amalu, he said, I have a simple answer. Dalu tevusa, take the Aron Kodesh, which is very big, and put that in front of the doorway to block the tumah. Why would that block the tumah? A large wooden cabinet that's not made to move, it's made to remain permanently in one place, that's not makabel tumah. The kli eitza sulanachas ain't makabel tumah, and we know that a keli that's not makabel tumah is v'choytitz b'fnei tumah. That'll stop the tumah from coming in. So therefore, if you put that aron there, then the kohanim can walk in to the room. Amalei Rabban L'Rava, I think you're making a mistake with your assessment. Sometimes they do carry this aron around, meaning it is a dover hamatal talmolei. So Rava said, if that's the case, then my eitz is no good, and I don't have a solution for you how you could stop the tumah from coming into the shul. Yes, the kohanim cannot go in. If you have the mantlech of svarim that got worn out, you're allowed to make them into tachrichim for a meis mitzvah, and that is the proper way to bury those shemis as tachrichim for a meis mitzvah. What if you have a sefer Torah that was worn out? You bury it etel talmid chacham. You'll bury it together with the talmid chacham, and he doesn't have to be someone who knows everything. Rashi says, even if he only learned Mishnayos and Brises, but he didn't learn Gemara and he wasn't Mishamash Hamidi Chachamim to know halacha l'maisa. When you do bury Sefer Torah, you have to seal them in an earthenware keli that protects them. That protects them from getting ruined. Rapapi Mishmei Derav Mibei Knishta L'Veirabonon Shari. Are you allowed to upgrade a basic knesset to a basic medrash? So he says yes, because a basic medrash is an upgrade from a basic knesset. In a basic knesset they daven, in a basic medrash they learn. But Mibei Rabbanon L'Veiknishta also, you're not allowed to change something from a basic medrash to a basic knesset. That's a downgrade. Rapapa Mishmei Derav Masni Ipcha. He said exactly the opposite. That a basic knesset is the upgrade and a basic medrash is a downgrade. We will stop here. It's very late, and I want to wish everybody a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos.